The luxury market has recently been experiencing a meltdown. What started as a slow shift in buying habits has exploded into a full-scale crisis, leaving brands scrambling as millions of customers rush to return their bags. Warehouses are now stacked to the ceiling with unwanted inventory, and the scale is massive, over 2 million luxury bags pushed back into the system at once. The pressure is crushing these brands, forcing them to slash prices in ways that were unthinkable just months ago. Bags that once carried 4-figure tags are now being pushed out for pocket change, and the fallout is spreading fast. Refund requests keep rising, and bags are being dumped. Join us as we find out why a market that once thrived on exclusivity is now desperate for sales. The shift that transformed the bag industry. Luxury bags once carried a deep sense of pride and power, but the meaning behind them began to shift as the years moved on. For a long time, people worked hard, saved money, and built entire collections they hoped to pass down. But the moment new selling spaces showed up online, the balance started to change. These platforms grew fast and brought in new ways for people to buy and sell. What felt exciting at first slowly turned into a crowd of listings that grew more and more each day, and the world of rare items began to feel a bit too full. As these online resale spaces grew, they pulled in huge groups of sellers and buyers who wanted a taste of high-end fashion. What was once viewed as a tight and special world opened up wide almost overnight. Bags that people once waited months or years to find now showed up in long lists on big platforms. With every new upload, the market kept filling up, and the excitement of owning something hard to get started to fade. When something rare becomes easy to grab, the meaning behind it begins to drift away. The change pushed prices downward. Items that once left shelves quickly now sat without much interest, and people who had bought bags as long-term assets started to rethink their choices. Some looked through their collections and tried to figure out how the market had turned so fast. Others began to compare their pieces with dozens of nearly identical listings online and wondered if they would ever get back what they spent. The sense of security once tied to these items slowly slipped away as the crowding grew stronger. By the early 2020s, the idea of luxury bags transformed into something even bigger. They were no longer just personal pieces that people carried for style. They turned into items people traded as investments. As brands produced more and more each season, online stores filled up with pieces that were once rare to see. With just a few taps, anyone could scroll through large collections of high-end items. The magic of walking into a boutique and finding a treasured piece began to weaken, because now everything sat within reach on a screen. These platforms didn't just give people room to resell, they changed how people viewed the luxury world. They opened the door for many who always had no access to high-end fashion. Pre-owned pieces gave people a chance to get involved, even if the new items were far beyond reach. What was supposed to increase the value of these items ended up pushing the market in a different direction. The more pieces entered the scene, the faster the sense of rarity waned. And when rarity weakens, demand begins to drop. As the supply rose, even long-time collectors started to step back. For years, many believed bags would hold or grow their value, but the new landscape made them unsure. Some began to look for other places to put their money, places that didn't depend on a market filling up faster than it could handle. With so many pieces landing on platforms, prices softened, and owners rushed to sell before values dropped further. What once felt like a safe choice began to feel like a heavy risk that people wanted to shake off. While all this unfolded, brands themselves made choices that added new weight to the problem. The industry had always relied on limited pieces to build desire. Some bags were known for long wait lists, and people accepted that the wait made the item even more special. But as demand grew, major brands pushed out more pieces to keep up. They tried to meet the rising interest by increasing production, thinking it would keep customers happy and keep sales strong. Instead, they filled the market with items that once felt precious, and the special touch faded as production kept climbing. When the shelves and online feeds filled with these once rare pieces, collectors started to look at their items differently. They wondered if what they owned still carried the same weight, or if it had become just another item among thousands. The secondary market, originally meant to support rarity, now overflowed. The entire meaning behind luxury bags shifted from something cherished to something easily replaced. And as more people stepped away, the world that once seemed so exclusive found itself working harder than ever to hold on to its place in the modern market. The fall. The shift in the luxury bag market did not begin with a single event. It grew slowly as the world moved through rising costs, changing habits, and a growing sense that money needed to be handled with more care. By the time the financial hit of 2025 arrived, the market had already begun to lose its usual shine. People who once chased new releases started to pull back, looking for ways to stretch their budgets. Many had spent the early recovery years trying to rebuild their lives. However, the return of spending power did not last long enough to keep luxury goods moving the way they once did. The economy started to slow down, and the energy that once pushed high-end bags forward began to fade. What followed was a shift in how people saw these items. Bags that once carried a sense of achievement now felt unnecessary. As households dealt with higher bills and rising interest rates, buying a new designer piece no longer felt smart. The global supply chain issues also added more stress, making consumers look around and rethink how they used their money. Even those who loved fashion started to cut back. The rush of spending that happened right after the pandemic recovery began to fall off. Wealth that had seemed strong in the early years started to thin out, and demand for high-end bags began to break apart. This change slowly pushed prices down as buyers backed away from large purchases. The market soon started to overflow with more bags than buyers. Items that usually sold as fast as they reached the shelves now sat waiting. The sudden drop in demand pushed brands and resellers to lower prices again and again just to keep inventory moving. Stores and platforms were packed with pieces that no longer drew attention. Some products sat for months without anyone picking them up. The market, which had once felt full of energy, now felt drained as sellers struggled to keep up with the shift. As supply kept building up, prices began to fall sharply. Bags that once carried extremely high value dropped until they almost looked like regular items. Many people who had bought them earlier started to watch their collections lose worth in real time. High-end pieces that once acted like stable assets no longer worked the same way. The drop hit every level of luxury, not just the lower-end designs. Even the rare pieces from the biggest names could not avoid the downturn. Bags that once pushed past massive price points now moved at far lower numbers, and some couldn't move at all. This sudden shift shook the confidence of many long-time collectors. The idea of waiting years for a special seemed useless. Instead of holding rare pieces proudly, owners started to worry about losing more value each month. Resale platforms that had once helped the market grow now struggled to keep the system steady. They were filled with items that no longer matched their old worth. The flood of goods made it hard for them to keep prices stable. With so many bags hitting the market at once, the balance between sellers and buyers broke apart completely. The platforms had been built to move luxury bags easily, connecting people across the world. For years, they pushed the resale market forward and helped high-end pieces reach new groups of buyers. But when 2 million bags entered the market, everything began to fall apart. Prices changed from week to week, making it hard for anyone to trust the numbers. A bag valued high one month could be worth far less the next month. This made buyers slow down and wait, unsure of how long the drop would continue. As hesitation grew, the flow of money through the market weakened even more. Sellers who relied on these platforms began to hold back. Many feared listing their bags only to watch them lose more value. Others, who sold luxury bags for a living, struggled to keep their businesses going. Buying new inventory made no sense because each purchase came with the risk of losing money. Even those who once flipped bags for quick profit started to stop their operations. They chose to store their pieces or walk away from the market altogether. The luxury bag market had entered a long and uncertain period. The energy that once pushed it forward had faded, replaced by caution and hesitation. The oversupply, the economic slowdown, and the rapid drop in value all worked together to reshape the industry. Collectors, resellers, and everyday buyers all had to rethink how they approached these items. What once felt like a safe and growing space now felt unpredictable. As the world moved ahead, it became clear that the market would need time to rebuild, adjust, and find a new path forward. How the luxury bag market lost its grip on exclusivity. Over time, something shifted in how people saw luxury bags. Once, many buyers believed these items were timeless treasures, things to pass down through generations. They did not just think of them as pretty fashion pieces, but as real investments. But gradually, that belief was fading. As more brands released mass-produced lines, buyers started noticing that not all bags behaved like investments. Instead of their prices rising, many slowed or even fell. That realization changed how people thought about buying luxury. What was normally a solid financial wisdom now felt less reliable. Wealthy collectors who used to load up on these luxury bags began to pull back. Rather than locking their money into handbags, they began spreading their wealth into other places. Real estate, stocks, artworks, and even newer digital assets began to look more attractive. In spreading out their investments, they found that bags no longer played the central role they once did. Those status symbols that had marked long-term success started to feel like relics of a more material-obsessed era, a style out of sync with today's market. At the same time, the internet transformed how luxury was perceived. Social media made these once exotic bags feel common. On feeds all around the world, people saw the same shapes, logos, and silhouettes again and again. Instead of exclusivity, there was saturation. That constant exposure slowly drained away some of their mystique. As a result, many buyers began to look for something different. They started to favor brands that portrayed elegance, soft designs, high-quality materials, and simple shapes. These pieces didn't shout with big logos. They felt more personal and refined. They allowed people to stand out in a way that didn't rely on loud status signals. Over time, that trend reshaped the market. The once iconic luxury bags, especially those that had dominated for decades, began losing their appeal. Buyers shifted toward craftsmanship over brand recognition. Their priorities changed. They cared more about what was made and how it was made than whether name and logo appeared in flashy places. The shift hit hardest when the market suffered a major crash. At one point, nearly 2 million luxury bags were reportedly flooding into resale and retail channels, leaving warehouses and store shelves heavy with unsold inventory. What used to feel like a safe bet now looked risky. The idea of buying a handbag and watching it appreciate in value no longer held for many people. That old investment logic seemed broken. Because of this crash, the entire luxury bag business began to rethink its way forward. Brands started reconsidering their strategies. Rather than pushing out new models, some began to return to old values, limited quantities, deep craftsmanship, and designs that carried meaning beyond the logo. This change matters deeply, because this downturn is more than a temporary slump. It's a moment that's altering how people think, not just how they shop. How the industry recovers will depend greatly on whether brands are willing to build in a new direction. Those that lean into scarcity rather than mass production are better placed to regain trust. When people buy a bag that feels special, not just because of the name, but because it was made with care and purpose, they feel more connected to it. And in a market where many are rejecting flash in favor of substance, that connection could prove essential. Meanwhile, brands that try to return to old habits, flooding the market, pushing aggressive launches, may struggle. The appetite for quantity is fading, and consumers are increasingly demanding more thoughtful luxury. Interestingly, in the next phase of this industry, luxury may not be defined by how many people own a bag, but by how deeply each piece resonates. The future belongs to those who are ready to leave behind old excess and build something more meaningful, refined, and rare. A luxury that matches what people truly want today. The changing face of high-end fashion. Many luxury names struggled the moment the market fell apart, especially the ones that had built their success on easy access and mass demand. These brands had pushed their bags into every corner of the market, turning them into everyday trophies rather than rare pieces. When the downturn hit, the brands that once grew by reaching everyone began to feel the pressure. And one of the first to deal with this shift was Louis Vuitton. The brand had enjoyed years of glory, and it had built an image that stood above most of the industry. But once it spread out too far, the cracks began to show. Louis Vuitton spent many years growing into the widest kind of luxury, and that growth made it stand out. But this same expansion slowly worked against it. As the brand pushed out new products and let logos take over the designs, shoppers started to pull back. People who once saw the brand as the very top of luxury now started to look elsewhere. Even though Louis Vuitton remained one of the world's most visible names, it no longer held the same power among the extremely wealthy. The brand was dragged down because its bags appeared almost everywhere. Luxury once depended on rarity, but when a product showed up on every street and every feed, it lost the mystery that gave it power. Louis Vuitton faced this reality, and Gucci dealt with the same shift. Gucci had moved through several eras, each one trying to reinvent the brand and push it forward. These reinventions helped it stay current, but they also caused the brand to lean heavily on bold logos that became too common. What once looked refined slowly turned into designs that aimed for a younger crowd. And this shift pushed the brand further into mainstream fashion rather than true exclusivity. For a long time, Gucci had lived on craftsmanship and heritage, but its newer approach pulled it away from those roots. It tried to match fast-moving trends, and this made the brand more reachable but less respected by people with high spending power. Middle-income shoppers still reached for these bags, but the upper class began to drift toward brands that held on to rarity. The strange twist in all of this was how these once elite names started to feel more like bold fashion signals rather than timeless pieces worth keeping for life. As the financial crash spread through the market, these brands entered a difficult race to win back the feeling of exclusivity. While some brands struggled, others held on to what made them strong from the start. Bottega Veneta rose quickly during this shift because it never chased mass attention. Instead, it stayed focused on depth, skill, and careful design. The 2025 crash pushed the idea of subtle luxury into the spotlight, and Bottega sat right at the center of this movement. The brand's famous woven leather work stood as a symbol of skill rather than loud branding. With no symbols on the surface, the bags relied only on craftsmanship to make an impact. This minimal approach once seemed too simple for some shoppers, but the crash changed the market's mindset. After years of people showing off large logos, consumers welcomed bags that carried value through feel and detail. Bottega Veneta's pieces did not need instant recognition to feel special. The stitching, the softness of the materials, and the careful shaping worked together to create a sense of rarity. People who cared about originality and refinement started to move toward the brand, and this shift pushed demand upward. As the industry reshaped itself, pre-owned Bottega bags began to sell for more than their original prices. This rise showed how much the market had turned towards subtle craftsmanship rather than loud designs. Luxury no longer needed to push itself out into the world. Instead, it needed to draw people in quietly through quality. This shift helped inspire another strong trend that grew after the crash: the rise of customized luxury bags. Personalization moved into the center of the industry because buyers wanted items that felt like extensions of their identity. Customization began to grow as shoppers looked for pieces that could stand apart from widely produced designs. Brands like Louis Vuitton began offering small ways for buyers to add elements to their bags, but personalization soon went far beyond that. People wanted bags built around their taste, shape, and personality. This meant choosing features from handles to colors, from trims to special finishes. Some asked for hand-painted details, while others asked for unique embossing. The process allowed buyers to build bags that belonged only to them. This new approach helped solve the oversaturation problem that had taken over the market. Instead of buying several bags from the same brand, shoppers preferred a few items that were significant. Custom pieces represented more than style because they carried emotional value. This shift also aligned with the growing interest in sustainability. Buyers felt better when they invested in something made with purpose and care rather than mass production. As the trend grew, personalization looked ready to shape the future of luxury. The next big question came from investors who wondered if luxury bags still held their financial strength after the crash. For many years, items from Hermes, Chanel, and Louis Vuitton had risen in value almost automatically. Buyers treated bags like assets. But the recent crash changed that pattern. It showed that the market could fluctuate and that nothing could rise forever. The new luxury environment pushed people to buy bags for deeper reasons instead of simple profit. The value of a bag now rested on the materials, the craftsmanship, and the long-term design rather than resale. Shoppers began to understand that luxury bags kept their worth when they held cultural meaning and design strength. When a bag carried a strong story, people kept it longer. When a bag relied only on hype, it faded faster. As the market moved through this transition, the brands that held onto their roots began to recover. The ones that let mass production take over continued to struggle. The crash did not only reduce prices, it reminded the industry that true luxury lived in small details, rare designs, and careful detailing. As the crash settled, the strongest brands were the ones that adjusted without losing their identity. They worked through the new market demands, leaned into exclusivity, and pushed out products that felt personal and unique. Meanwhile, brands that kept chasing fast trends watched their influence shrink. The crash worked like a filter, clearing out the parts of the market built on volume and leaving behind the parts built on artistry. The future of luxury now moved toward craftsmanship, rarity, and purpose. In the final stretch of this shift, the industry looked different from anything seen before. Many bags disappeared, many brands rebuilt their strategies, and many buyers changed their habits. The strongest players found new ways to connect with customers on a deeper level. The industry moved forward with a renewed focus on authenticity, and the brands that embraced these values were the ones most likely to lead the next era of luxury. The new reality of luxury brands. The shifts in the luxury world became impossible to ignore once the downturn began to unfold. A crash does not simply bring down resale prices, it spreads through every corner of the industry and forces everyone to rethink the meaning of value. The high peaks that once defined the resale market are unlikely to return, and many people who treated handbags like financial tools are now coming to terms with this new reality. But even with this change, collectors and fashion lovers are finding space to move forward. Instead of seeing an ending, some of them view this moment as a chance to step into the market in a different way. Many shoppers who once felt priced out are now discovering doors opening for them. Items that held unreachable price tags only a short time ago are beginning to appear at more manageable levels. Designs that slipped through their fingers years back are now showing up again, allowing them to pick up pieces they thought they had lost forever. This shift is creating a reset across the board. The days of expecting massive price jumps may be fading, but the meaning of luxury is taking on a new form. People are learning to value these items not only for potential profit, but also for the craftsmanship and artistry that shaped them. This new direction is encouraging brands to rethink how they present themselves. Some labels stepped into the evolving market early by focusing on designs that did not need bold symbols or large patterns to stand out. Their minimal approach suddenly felt refreshing in a world that had grown tired of big logos. As consumers pulled away from flashy trends, bags rooted in clean lines, rich materials, and strong construction began climbing back up in popularity. These brands held steady because they leaned on quality instead of noise, and now they are finding themselves in a strong position as the market reshapes itself. This rise in appreciation for subtle design has allowed certain labels to take the lead. Companies known for their expert stitching, careful shaping, and natural materials are discovering a renewed interest. Shoppers who want items that reflect patience and skill are turning toward these brands, choosing products that stand out through structure rather than symbols. Leather crafted by artisans, woven textures, and hand-finished edges are gaining ground. As the market moves away from mass-produced trends, consumers are reaching for pieces that feel rare and rooted in real creativity. At the same time, sustainability is beginning to guide many buying decisions. People are growing tired of owning shelves full of items they rarely use. Instead, they want pieces that represent thoughtful choices and long-term value. Natural leather, responsibly sourced materials, and careful production methods are becoming more appealing. Brands that commit to lower waste and slower creation are earning respect. Consumers who understand the worth of craftsmanship are finding themselves drawn toward items that do not appear in every store window. This shift shows how deeply the idea of luxury is evolving and how much buyers are starting to rethink their habits. Even so, the question of recovery continues to circle the industry. No one can fully predict if the market will rise back to the heights of past years, but signs of balance are beginning to appear. Some companies are pulling back from overproduction and creating more curated releases. They want to rebuild exclusivity by focusing on smaller runs and thoughtful collections. The outlet culture that once defined the industry is fading, and brands are now stepping into a slower, more refined rhythm. This new pace gives them the chance to rebuild respect and attract buyers who appreciate rarity. As wealthy consumers shift their attention, their priorities are changing as well. They are no longer searching for items that simply show up in photos or trend cycles. Instead, they want pieces that feel personal and long-lasting. Their purchases reflect their values more than their desire to follow the crowd. Luxury is becoming less about showmanship and more about connection. A well-made bag, crafted with purpose and care, holds a lasting influence that goes beyond temporary hype. Brands that honor this outlook will have an easier time staying relevant as the market continues to reshape itself. All of this leads to a new chapter in the story of luxury bags. The crash marked the end of a period driven by excess and constant releases, but it also opened the door to a stronger, more intentional future. The market is settling into a different rhythm, one where scarcity and craftsmanship work hand in hand. Consumers are reflecting on what luxury actually means to them and choosing pieces that carry meaning rather than noise. In this changing landscape, treasures still exist for those who look for them. The brands that embrace this reset and evolve with it will have the chance to redefine the next era of high-end fashion, while shoppers who step into the market now can rethink what they truly want to bring home. What do you think is the solution to the crash in the luxury brand industry? Let us know your views in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe to this channel. Before you go, watch the other videos on your screen.